going on, everyone? Coming to you with another book review, and this time we're looking at a manga. I don't really want to make a point of reviewing too much manga on the channel, mainly because I feel like reviewing manga is weird, because when I review a book, I pick up the book, I read it, I think about it, I type out a review, then I record a video, and I talk about it. And it's all the story of that one book. With a manga, and I own quite a bit, I don't know how much of my manga is going to be visible on either side of me over here, but when you read a manga, it's usually just telling you a percentage of one overall story, and oftentimes you'll have multiple stories told throughout the course of a manga, such as, Dragon Ball. If we look at Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z, there are several story arcs and entire stories contained within that one manga series. And so you could review entire arcs in one go, which would span anywhere from maybe 6 to 12 or even 15 volumes of manga, depending on what series you're reading. And so you can do it that way. But then you have other manga like Vampire Hunter D here, which each manga volume is a self-contained story, which is then part of an overarching grander story, which is the same way that novels are written. And the reason that manga like this exists, or at least in this particular case, is that this is a manga adaptation of a novel series, the Vampire Hunter D novel series. And so I feel much more comfortable reviewing each volume of Vampire Hunter D standalone, because they are just visual adaptations of existing word novels, And so, there's a stigma, I know, with a lot of readers surrounding graphic novels, whether they're American comics, or manga, or manhwa, or manhwa, or whatever form of visual graphic novel you've got. Basically, what a lot of people would dismiss as a picture book when they want to really put it down. But really, the purpose of a graphic novel is to show and not tell in a way that could be arguably considered more effective than a standard novel could. I say arguably because some people have very vivid imaginations and can picture everything they're reading when picking up a book, and other people lack that ability. My brother, for example, doesn't really have the ability to visualize things. He doesn't really have that component, I guess you could say. And so for him, graphic novels and visual novels and comics and manga and all that, they work much better for him. And so there is a place for all of this. So just know that Volume 1 of the manga is the same story as Volume 1 of the novel, albeit abridged and not without its issues, which I am going to talk about. So the manga, I'm going to read the name on the back because I always butcher Japanese names. I've been a fan of anime and manga for decades, since I was a little kid. Grew up watching Dragon Ball and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And everything else, but I still struggle with Japanese names. But Hideyuki Kikuchi, I believe is how it's pronounced, wrote the novel series, and it was adapted into this visual form by a man named Saiko Takaki. Okay? And I will say that I enjoyed my read of this. I haven't read the novels, the light novels for the series, but I did enjoy my read of this. However, I will say that immediately I could tell that it was an adaptation of something else, even if no one had told me that it was. Because it did feel a little abridged at points, and the art panels didn't always help me to understand the sequence of events that was happening, which is a bit of a sin with a graphic novel. If you're going to do a graphic novel of any kind, you really need to make sure that the imagery is filling in all the blanks for the lack of descriptive dialogue you would ordinarily get in a book, or the lack of descriptive text you would ordinarily get in a book. So there were many panels where I would read the text, look at the art, and then read the next panel and think, how did we get there? Not to a crazy degree, but enough that it annoyed me a bit. So before I get too much into that, I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about Vampire Hunter D. It takes place in the year 12,090 AD, so it's very far future. And the world has been destroyed by war, essentially. It's a post-apocalyptic world, and there's been all sorts of radiation leaking, and it's created all these different mutants. Okay, we're talking humans with mutant powers. Like, there's a character in the story who has, I think it's bronze or brass skin, and then another one who has, portal placements type of stuff going on. And then you've got werewolves and were-spiders and dragons and, of course, The biggest thing are vampires. Vampires, also known as the nobility, view it as their right to rule the world under the guidance of their sacred ancestor, or the words given to them by their sacred ancestor. Okay, the great god progenitor of all vampires, aka Dracula. So, Vampire Hunter D follows a vampire hunter. Okay, in this world there are hunters who often specialize in one specific type of supernatural force so that they may better deal with a threat. And all these supernatural threats are superhuman, so only the best of the best can be hunters. Think of them a lot like witchers, but they're specializing in one specific type of monster. It's like if Geralt of Rivia specialized in strigas. That kind of thing. D is kind of like that. He is a vampire hunter primarily. He'll deal with other threats, and he does throughout the events of this book, but he primarily hunts vampires. And he himself is a Dhampir, okay, which is the result of a vampire and a mortal woman having a child together. So he's above the average human. And D's personality is very much in line with characters like Geralt of Rivia, who, by the way, D's character existed beforehand. I believe Vampire Hunter D's first book was published in 1983, and The Witcher was in like 1986. I could be wrong on that, but I do believe D predates Geralt, so I don't think there's inspiration being drawn. Nor do I think Geralt drew inspiration from this. It's just two different cultures. But he's very much your traditional stoic swordsman type of character. Superhuman in his abilities, doesn't say a whole lot, is incredibly skilled, and no normal person can hope to compare to him, which is why he's always fighting non-normal people. And D is definitely the best character of the book. He reminds me of Geralt in a lot of ways, and I'm going to keep making that comparison because it's what he does. There's a lot of things between these two stories that relate to me because the characters are fairly similar. Unlike The Witcher, many of the other characters in the story fell a little bit flat for me, to the point where I'm having a hard time even remembering the lead female character's name. I'm going to have to open this up, and I just finished reading this like 4 hours ago, and I'm already having a hard time remembering this woman's name. That is how unmemorable she was to me. Let's see, what was her name? I know, very professional stuff here, right? Doris Lang. There we go. Doris Lang. You meet her very, very early on. She basically talks with D and contracts him to kill a vampire who bit her. Okay, so she's been bitten, given the kiss of nobility by this ancient and powerful vampire named Magnus Lee, who, by the way, is, kind of your typical hides in the shadows, reveals himself at the last moment for the big epic fight character, and I enjoyed that. He was actually one of the better characters of the book. But the main female character very much annoyed me, and I know a lot of people cite the constant sexual exploitation and gratification for the more explicit moments in the story. There is nudity depicted in the artwork, I'll let you know. But she's offering like sexual services to D to help her with her problem. And while I'm not saying that's beyond the scope of what a woman might do if she was desperate enough in a situation, I know it's certainly happened throughout history. I feel like she's jumping to it too eagerly before even discussing other options, and it very much felt like Hideyuki didn't know how to properly write a female character. And beyond that, she's getting groped and assaulted by other characters throughout the series in a way that kind of came off as senseless. And I enjoy series like Game of Thrones and The Sword of Truth, where sexual assault is a common theme in those books, but they're always done with a purpose or something they wanted to illustrate. In Game of Thrones, it's often that they're men at war, and it's a horrible aspect of humanity that people do that when they're at war. It's not forgivable or excusable, but it's a look into real human activity. In the Sword of Truth series, it's largely to show either how despicable and evil the villain is, or to put you in a sense of dread for the female character that you come to know and love. Here, it did feel like fan service in a way that's a bit gross for me. I don't enjoy that. and I didn't like the way the female character was written. I didn't like how quickly she began to fall in love. It felt super artificial, and I wasn't invested in her or the relationship she wanted to exist at all. I'll be honest, I wasn't. I did like the dynamic between her and her little brother. I thought that was sweet. I thought that was fun to read. Again, felt a little abridged. You could definitely tell things were left out of the novel that would have built on their relationship further and made you like them even more. But that's often a trade-off you get when you're trading, the additional length of the story for some visual pleasure. So I can live with that. There's also a band of mutant thugs whose the band's name I can't bother to remember, and the characters' names I can't be bothered to remember because they didn't leave a lasting impression. One was an old witch, one had skin made out of like bronze or something, and one of them had the ability to like create a portal on their body and then open the portal somewhere else. So like if you try to stab him, he'd make you stab yourself. Power was cool. The character was, for me, a very much throwaway whatever character. So, yeah, the characters are a bit of a weak point, at least in this volume. I liked D quite a bit. I thought he was fun. I thought he was cool. I thought he was badass. The fight scenes are excellent. The artwork is just phenomenal. And it's an old school style of artwork. It really does remind me of things like Berserk or Bastard or what's another example? Fist of the North Star, that kind of thing. Because when we look at the artwork, I think the artwork is incredible. I love stuff like this. It's very detailed, and it's extremely well drawn. But I can't help but feel like the story, for this particular book anyhow, suffered a little bit by being in a manga format versus the novel format. It feels like stuff was left out. Maybe the relationship is handled better in the novel. I would love to pick up the novel and review it separately and see which is better. Maybe do a comparison video and talk about it. But I don't know. I enjoyed the read. I'm going to read the rest of the series because I do own the other 6 volumes, although I know Volume 8 came out last year. I'll need to pick that up. I'm going to keep reading it because I did enjoy it. But it felt like something was missing, and that's the thing, is I've never read the novels, but I could still feel like I was missing something when reading this adaptation, which is never something you want to see in a visual novel adaptation, a graphic novel adaptation. Visual novels are something entirely different. In a graphic novel adaptation of an existing story. So, I don't know, I was a little bit bummed out by that. Not in a way that made me hate the book. Like I said, I enjoyed my time with it. I love the concept at play here. So far in the future, I love post-apocalyptic worlds. Fallout is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. I love the fact that this falls into sci-fi and fantasy because, there are advanced pieces of technology. People have guns. People have these weird force fields. The horses even have, mechanical augmentation. There's all sorts of cool scientific technology in the book, but then also you have your fantasy aspects of swordplay and magic and supernatural beings. And then, of course, because it's vampires, you have the horror aspect attached to it. So there's a lot going on here, and I enjoy that. It's very pleasing to read, very engaging, but there's a lot of aspects that do fall flat. I don't know. It may sound like my opinions are conflicting with each other a little bit, and maybe they are. It's very unique, is what I would say. If you're a fan of manga and you like series like Trinity Blood and Hellsing and Berserk or Bastard, I would recommend Vampire Hunter DBU. If you are a fan of novels and you enjoyed stuff like The Witcher or the Supernatural books, aka as in the Supernatural TV series tie-in novels, things like that, I would recommend the Vampire Hunter D manga to you. Otherwise, I'm not sure it has much value to offer. For me, it was a 3 out of 5. Like I said, I enjoyed it, but there's definitely things about it that needed some work. And I'm hoping that as I read more, the future installments will do a better job. So, yeah, that has been my review. Hopefully you all enjoyed. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, I'll see you later. Peace, and take care.